Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 3 of the Esports Professionals Network weekly panel. This is where we kind of bring in the experts of the field to, pick their brains and, really share any knowledge as we can with you guys, along with creating an active and open discussion around, all things esports. Last couple of weeks, we did one on social media. We did one on the current trends. And this week, we're going to be talking about professionalism. And that can range anywhere from what professionalism means in esports to developing how you can actually become professional or have that professional image and mindset, and going on into just changing your day-to-day routines to be more aligned with what you should be doing. With the orientation of what Esports Professionals Network is, which is that professional networking group to connect people one-on-one with other professionals in the industry. It's great. It's very important to have the mindset and the skills to be able to kind of move forward in that professional side. So that's why I decided to bring in David Bowman. He kind of opened up a few lights for me a couple weeks ago whenever I was on his show, which is I'll let him get into that as well. But I always like to give in a little bit of description on why I bring on people into the panel, just because I think it adds value to why I feel that this person knows what the hell they're talking about. And for this, I'm going to go into what David did for his show. And for anyone who's been on his show, what he does is he reaches out to you first, and then he literally sends over like a 2 or 3 page proposal on what the whole conversation is going to look like, what type of questions he's going to ask, the time frame, what you should be doing beforehand. The whole experience was just beyond professional, and it wasn't just like, hey, do you want to be on my panel or on my show? And kind of there's the end of it. David can ask you, like, I haven't been super professional on how I organize and propose this. It's kind of like, hey, I want you to on my show. I need some payback here. But I'll let David talk about who he is, what he does, and how you can tune into his show.
All right. My main show is called the Coffee and Scotch Esports Show. It can be found on esports.online. It was formerly called the Esports Hero Cafe because Esports Hero is who sponsors me to do that show every week. And then I also do a couple other video series, including the most recent series with those of you who know Carly Morgan from the Esports Professionals Network. We do a show called Whiplash, the Esports Show. That I know Brandon's posted a couple of those videos, and they're found on my YouTube channel as well at Bowman Show that you can find right here. So, but basically, I kind of got into it because I wanted to talk about and do research into the behind the scenes of the esports scene. And the topic of being professional is kind of my early years in esports was actually back in 2003 with Unreal Tournament. And it was one of those things where unprofessional behavior was, if you've seen some of my videos, I know I've talked the death out of it, but we actually lost a sponsorship with Coca-Cola because of unprofessional behavior in the forums from admins and directors and stuff like that of our community that we were a part of. And back in 2003, $3,000 plus additional prizes from a brand like Coca-Cola was a huge deal at the time, and we screwed it up. And it was 100% because of unprofessional behavior. So the reason I do these videos is because, now you still see those same trends that screwed us in the past over 10 years ago happening today. And now they're hitting big news outlets. They're hitting things like the LA Times. They're hitting things, like obviously we have the esports things like the Daily Dot and now ESPN. But like those news articles are being talked about in big news networks now. And a lot of them are negative. And it all stems from having a little bit of professionalism, in my opinion. So that's kind of why I do the videos, is to try to teach and educate on different aspects of esports.
That's awesome. I always commend you guys on, what you guys do over there. And if you guys are ever looking for his shows, just go to YouTube and literally type in, I think it is Bowman Shuda is what you kind of have the show under right now. So go watch his stuff. Great content. It's going to educate you guys on so many different areas. So with that, we're going to get into our first question or subtopic, however you guys like to call it, which is, what is your definition of professionalism? And this isn't just for esports. This is kind of just a blanket term on how would you describe professionalism. We'll get into how it is in esports after you answer that question.
Well, my idea of professionalism is something of how basically you carry yourself on a day-to-day basis, not just when you're in that professional scene or you're at the workplace, but how you carry yourself in your day-to-day life. Like, do you get up and shower every morning, even if you don't have to go anywhere? Being professional has to be habitual, essentially. So, and one thing I learned, I'm an Eagle Scout, so like I got a leadership and being mature and all that stuff ingrained from like day one. So kind of somewhat my definition of being professional is every action that you take that's going to be in the public eye, that's going to matter to someone. Take a minute and make sure you are doing it correctly and make sure you got all your ducks in a row. There's a reason I send out those proposals, and it's actually more for me than it is for my guests. It's just kind of like a courtesy I do for the guests, but it's make sure that I have all my ducks in a row. So that way there's no surprises. There's nothing out of left field that happens when I do these productions, because I want them to be on point, and I want my guests to feel comfortable to talk about the things that they're experts in. Like when I had you on the episode, on the show, it's something that almost take pride in your work. And you see that too much times nowadays, as I mentioned earlier, in esports. And it's frustrating to see that people the whole foot and mouth syndrome is terrible, I think, as the biggest reason why we have a lot of things. And I'm rambling a little bit. I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. I think you're exactly right. There's kind of a habit to being a professional. And I think it's, when you look at some of the more professional people in the industry, you kind of see that exactly. You see how they kind of have guidelines for themselves. That's the kind of the best way I like looking at it. It's like you have guidelines and you have rules for yourself that, when you look at things from the perspective of other people, you want to make sure that when they look at you, they know they can trust you. Because I believe professionalism has a lot to do with trust. So like for me, it's all about making sure that I can establish trust with someone. And I think I've done that pretty well with the EPN. It's very difficult to say, it's very hard to get 550 different people to come into a group, and the fact that they kind of all trust each other to, not break kind of other members' rules or thoughts. And really, I've actually only seen like one conversation that's gotten extremely heated. And I think they even still diluted that conversation pretty well. So for me, I think it revolves a lot around trust, and it revolves a lot around having an image and having that pride in what you do, that that other people can trust you. So that's going to kind of segue us into our next conversation, which is, where is professionalism in esports? And this could be kind of going along towards how people actually act professional in the industry. Is there enough people being professional in the industry, and kind of where do you see the tides kind of rolling in the industry?
Well, I guess the best would be kind of to bring up the example you mentioned when we were chatting the other day was Tempo Storm, with the whole story about them selling their Counter-Strike team, and allegedly all blamed over a Skype call that Tempo Storm's owner hung up on. Which actually, apparently, if you do the research, the Skype call and them not making it into E-League are actually completely separate situations. But you will look at the fact that just the small fact that person saw who was going to be on the Skype call and hung up immediately. And you're the owner of a company. Like, you need to at least give that other person, even if you hate them, a little bit of common courtesy. And like in that situation, I would have went out to them and basically said, hey, I don't like working with you two individuals, but I want to work with your company. So is there any way we can reschedule this with different individuals within your company? Like, you don't have to actually work with them if you don't want to, but you still have to give them the courtesy, not just being almost a little childish and just hanging up the phone and being done with it. Because those types of behaviors, those types of problems are still prevalent in the esports scene today. It almost shocked me on how many, you mentioned the proposals I sent out for my shows. It shocked me how many times I get the response, holy crap, you sent out a proposal? Like, I know you did it. I know Tyler did it. I know, like, half of my guests were like, wow, and to me in my day job, because I work for FedEx Ground and I'm a manager there, these types of daily communications are standard. Like, it's one of those things where it's expected to do those things, and it's looked down upon if you don't extend that common courtesy. Even if you don't like the person, even if you don't want to work with them, you still have to extend that common courtesy to those people on a daily basis. And just look at the news articles recently, like the whole WESA terrible PR thing that I know the EPN discussed to high water and hell. But it's just, taking that minute to make sure you don't have that foot and mouth syndrome. And it's, I'm rambling. Can you tell I've been up since 3 a.m? So
I've been there. I've done those days before. You're exactly right. And there's a single word that I really kind of like that you put in there, which is the word standard. There has to be kind of a place where more kind of teams, there's more organizations, players that are kind of looking at the standard of how things are done. When you look at kind of traditional sports, if there's kind of not a proposal or not a contract in place or kind of sent over, things just don't get done. There's a lot of talking that gets done beforehand, but when you look at, the situations that could happen, having those things in place are kind of the standard. The NFL is like, hey, you guys need to do this or else, bad things happen. Or the Players Association kind of steps in and says, hey, we need to be doing things. I really like that. And I think there's a lot of room for kind of how the industry works to have that standard or create it. There is a lot of areas, especially in the tier 1 side. We've seen more developments happening to bring things to be more professional, such as WISA. You have the esports player resource being developed by Bryce and Snoopay. There's a lot of things in development, and there's a lot of things trying to be done because they realize that there's lawsuits being handed out. There's a lot of PR, a lot of bad PR, and that, I think that's a topic on its own. But it's just part of the professional kind of image. I probably have said this about 2 or 3 different times on our panels here. But one of the reasons I started esports entrepreneurs is because I got really upset with how I think it was TSM at the time handled their PR situations. It was all about these big blow up scenes. Players are really just saying, "Hey, here's what's been going on, and here's why this organization sucks." And when you look at things like that, it's just kind of like, wow, why is a company that's working with $1 million deals doing this? You as a $1 million company, it's very difficult for you to, just like the Coca-Cola example, it's very difficult for a $1 million company to work with you if your company's out there bringing bad things to their name. Just with Tiger Woods and Nike, or obviously we haven't had any of those situations just because esports relationships aren't something that's kind of out there. But there are those situations that arise if it's bad visas to saying coaches are being terrible, or just slandering different people in the industry, which is probably one of the biggest complaints I have is the amount of slander and defamation that happens between either players, coaches, organizations, teams, and even like tournament organizers. There's a lot of it going around, and people think that's the only way that they can kind of get revenge is if they go public with things. Which, I mean, there's a fair amount to that. But there's also a lot of things in the back end that could kind of, not hurt so many people. So I think with that, I'm going to lead it into our next question topic, which is actually I kind of answered that one. But how can someone that has no professional experience, as in they've never had a real career that's outside of like McDonald's or fast food, that's kind of jumping in right after the university, or who have been working, a kind of a non-professional career, but jumping in, trying to make sure that they do handle things, but have never experienced it. Like, what do you think is kind of where people should really kind of focus on when trying to be professional and not having kind of any experience in it at all? Oh, I don't hear you. Is that me? I think your mic cut out. I don't think that was me. Okay, we're gonna let David reset real fast because it looks like his microphone's not working. So with that, I'm going to kind of give you guys some of my opinion on that, which is if you're really looking to be professional or have a professional image, really go and just read. There's nothing about learning. If you think that at the age of 23, after you get done at college, or 22, whatever year you get done with university, that you're done learning, you really need to rethink your mindset. Just because professionals in the industry they literally can't stop learning. Yeah, I think we got you back, David. Is that right?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think you hit the head on the nail with your question, which how you phrased it, at least on the little notes we have here, is how you can be more professional with no professional experience. And I think your example of the NFL was great earlier, because the NFL has a rookie symposium that they do for these kids, essentially, or young adults that are going into an environment where the spotlight's going to be on them 24/7. Their Twitter accounts, their social medias, everything is going to be scrutinized immediately once they join this NFL. And so they actually teach people how to be more professional, how not to, make rape jokes on Twitter. We saw in the last NFL draft, someone actually lost their draft position because, lo and behold, they had a picture on Twitter of them smoking a bowl. It's one of those things where at this stage of the game in esports, especially with your bigger teams, your teams that have, $1 million deals and they have 6-figure players, they should hire some sort of person to come in to teach these things, to teach the basics of, PR, to teach the basics of public speaking, to teach the basics on written communication, all these things, or at the very least, have someone that they go to when they're about to make an angry tweet and be like, hey, I'm going to tweet this. Should I tweet it? Yes or no? And they just send them the copy of it real quick. And then the person responds, no. We're at the point where, the reason we lost the Coca-Cola sponsorship was because, I was 16 at the time. We were young, dumb idiots, essentially. We were playing a game for fun, and we're super stoked that we could give away prizes for our tournaments, But it is something that a lot of these players, they're, 17, 18, 19-year-olds who, haven't gone to college. They probably, got through high school, as best they could, but in reality, they're not 4.0 students probably. And they have probably no experience being out in the public eye, having to talk to people face to face, because they're used to talking to people online. And so it's one of those things where these teams need to take a little responsibility and hire someone to come out and run a 6-hour seminar or a 4-hour seminar on how to just be a little more professional and to set the expectations of the world that these kids are walking into. And I guess I shouldn't say kids, because I'm not that much older, but at the same time, it's something that the teams need to be proactive on. And we can't have instances like, I think it was 2 days ago on Twitter, I forget who it was, but a player tweeted out a rape joke, and the owner had to get involved and delete the tweet.
I guess, David.
I don't know what is going on with my internet. This is annoying.
That's quite all right. Go ahead.
But anyway, the teams and the owners, they need to take responsibility, and even if it's something like the LCS needs to, they put together a seminar before every split where they send a person out to every team. They need to do something like that, I think. And that's how you take people who have no professional experience and teach them things, is you hire someone to come in and just run a seminar.
I think you're absolutely right. And, I think if there's anyone watching this that is looking for an idea for a business, being that kind of third party that does that, I think that could be an opportunity to start something up if you know what the hell you're talking about. I think there's a lot of room for kind of starting a almost a training session that organizations can hire you for 2 or 3 days to go through. Here are the things that you shouldn't do. Here are the things you can do. Here you can optimize your influence to kind of help our sponsors. And I think there's a lot of room for teaching players to do things. And I think you're just right with that, especially on the player side. I think there's a lot of areas that professionals that are kind of on the back end, like me and you, that aren't. Well, I think you're more on the kind of the front facing side of the show than I am. But there's also a lot to be said for those that are kind of, influencers in the industry. If you have more than 2,000 or 3,000 followers, you have power within your own community. So with that in mind, it's very, very important you watch what you put on social media, that you watch what you kind of really put out there. But if you're really wanting to kind of, build a kind of a professional image around like your knowledge base, it's very important that you create content as well that kind of proves your expertise. Because more or less, if no one knows what the hell you do, there's no real kind of authority that you have. You can't build that trust if you don't kind of inform people. Yeah, you can, make calls with them, and that's going to build a good level of trust if you're facing, kind of one-on-one with a Skype call or sitting down for lunch. I'm a big fan of lunch and dinner type meetings. I think they're really cool, just because if you get an opportunity to have lunch or dinner with someone, I think you should take it up, especially in the esports industry. You get to learn a lot more about them and really kind of make a better connection. Just because there isn't enough kind of one-on-one conversations with people anymore. So definitely something interesting there that I think we should always kind of consider. And I think we're going to move into our last question, just because I want to have some room for Q&A. Hopefully people ask some Q&A questions. But that's, I guess, is actually kind of having a conversation about this as well. But how do professionals manage, being professional on social media, but also being themselves? Because there's a fine line there, because you see the disclaimers like, hey, all of my tweets represent me and not my organization or companies, blah, 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 blah. And Roger Quiles actually wrote a really good article on this for me on Esports Entrepreneur, which is pretty much just no, it's not going to help you in court, or it really doesn't mean kind of anything. And they're absolutely right with that, because, when you look at, the disclaimers, at the end of the day, you're still representing the company in some form. So what's your take on that, David?
Social media is an interesting beast in itself, especially someone's interaction with their community, with their fans. It's something that I have been doing research into, because until these last couple of years, I've kind of avoided social media like the plague. Like I didn't use my Twitter account really until maybe about 2 years ago. But it's interesting, because the more you look into it, you realize that you need to have those public interactions. Like I hate direct messages on Twitter. And the reason is because like a lot of that stuff is either spam or something that they probably should have just publicly tweeted at me, or I should have publicly tweeted at them, because it's not some of those things shouldn't be a private conversation. Some of those things, if you're trying to promote yourself, if you're trying to promote someone else, if you're trying to do something, it should be out in the public. And that shows that you're interacting with your community and interacting with your fans. And if you need to take it to a private conversation, then you can go to the DM like to discuss details. If you want to reach out to someone, don't DM them. Send them a tweet. They're more likely to retweet it than they are to read a DM, more than likely, especially if it's someone who has thousands of followers and get notifications. So, but at the same time, social media can't be like, you're not anonymous on social media really anymore. If you have a Twitter account, you have a Facebook account, you can't be anonymous, especially if you want to be active in the esports scene. So you do have to hold yourself accountable to the content that you put out there. Yes, someone may post a really hilarious, tweet with a GIF that's kind of vulgar and stuff like that. But like, do you really want to retweet that so that way you see it? Maybe you should have a personal Twitter account on the side or something like that. I know Thorn is an example of, he's one of those people that you don't want to follow his example as far as how he runs his social media. But at the same time, like, he does other things really well that impact esports in a positive way. So it's like he's like the best of all the worst worlds. So, but if you look at his Twitter account, it most of it's a giant mess. And it'd be a perfect example of what not to do on your Twitter account unless you're already stupid famous and don't care like Thorn does. So.
Yeah, no, there's a level of kind of stupid famous, and I think what Thorn does is great. Don't get me wrong. But there is definitely kind of a level of being very broad, or not broad, but being very blunt with how you say things. And you can piss a lot of people off very fast. And if you're a person in a celebrity that's willing to do that, you have to have a very kind of very hard head to kind of control the emotions behind either receiving a lot of flack or receiving a lot of praise, because there's a lot of bad that comes with a lot of good. So definitely thinking about, how you control that type of fluctuations and being very blunt with things. And you can see that I with Esports Entrepreneur, one of my goals on that was being very neutral with conversations. And I don't mean that in, saying that everyone's right, but also looking at, the conversations that people have and seeing that, I can see sides of the conversations or even the third side, when that happens. So there's a lot of angles that, when you're trying to be professional that you have to look at, because if you're not willing to, be aggressive, it can hurt you. But if you're being too passive, it can also hurt you. There's kind of a fine line of, controlling your own personality, but also making sure that you represent all of your parties involved. And I think it's a conscious decision that has to be made. And I think, you mentioned this earlier, is like having kind of that buffer, if you will, between, a player's social media, going through kind of a screen person saying, hey, yes or no, and then kind of it moving on. And, if you're a person that actually needs to have that, you have issues to begin with, that you probably should be kind of looking at from a personal level and making sure that, your kind of emotions and anger don't get the best of you and you tweet something that's going to hurt your reputation. Because we've seen that with people saying very sexist things in the industry. And if you want to be sexist in this industry, it's going to hurt you really fast, especially on a pro player level. So we are going to take a question from Mr. Jeremy. If he wants to jump in this open seat down here, he's more than welcome to. But his question is, thoughts on the esports organizations not responding back in emails? Is that seen as unprofessional or just them saying they are not interested with no response needed?
On impulse, I would say it is seen as unprofessional, but at the same time, depending on what their staffing is, they honestly may not have the staffing to respond to the number of emails they have. And it would look even worse if they just sent back an automated reply to everyone. But at the same time, I do think it's important to go through those emails. I've emailed Epic Games, back when we ran our tournament community, and they responded within 48 hours, which I think is a good response time for a company that big. It's one of those things where emails should be responded to, but at the same time, you have to give a lot of these esports organizations leeway as they're figuring out their internal structures as far as staffing and wise, because, think of you made TSM as an example earlier, and Reginald, no offense to all the great things he's done, he definitely wasn't, trained in any way in how to run a business. He just was ambitious enough and aggressive enough that he forced it to work, and now it's successful. But at the same time, it could have been ran completely differently and a whole lot better in the beginning, but you can't fault him because the money wasn't there in the beginning. It was esports is still, even to this day, a lot of it of just passionate individuals forcing things to work the best that they can. And it goes back to the original question of, if we have to be more professional, we have to almost look to other industries. How do they handle, receiving emails? Do they hire an admin at $12 an hour to sit there and reply to emails and forward emails and flag the ones that seem actually important or not important and stuff like that? And that's a choice that the company has to make in order to allocate that money, in order to, if it's worth them hiring on that staff member, or is the CEO, or is the owner, is the coach, or are they going to split the duties between multiple people where they just do a round robin? Hey, on Tuesday, it's your job to answer all the emails. It's a tough question, but I'm of the opinion they should respond to emails, even if it's just a courtesy of saying, hey, thank you for your interest, but at this time, we're not interested. Even if they copy and paste that's better than an automated reply, I think. But at the same time, I bet you it's a staffing issue, honestly, right now for most of those organizations.
No, I think you're definitely right with that. When we look at, my personal email, my esports entrepreneur email, um, I neglect to respond to specific emails just because, one, I don't know how to answer it at the time because I haven't made a decision on how I want to answer it. I do feel like I need to get better at that just because have been a few time sensitive things that I haven't taken care of. But with me, there's sometimes it's a difficult way to answer questions because a lot of times people are looking for an answer. And they don't want to be misguided or kind of led along a path. They want to be told yes or no. If you talk to salespeople who do emails, they will they just want a yes or no answer. If you're interested in buying, they don't want to hear all this bull honky about, oh, I'm still looking at different options. I'm still looking at this and that. They just want to be like, are you interested or not? Because, they're not going to, for them, it's a time thing. Or obviously it's not a great example to put into this, but it comes down to a time thing. And I personally wish could be better at responding to emails, but unfortunately there's only so much time in the day. And, I'm sure Reginald does feel the same way at times. But I think hopefully that answers Jeremy's questions as we can move on to what Game Without Pain has to ask. I do know he's an EPN member. He just recently joined this past week or two, I believe. So welcome to the group. I guess I should say hi to Jeremy. He was one of our panelists last week. But Game Without Pain asks, how do we find employees at companies? An example would be, I would like to talk to Logitech about sponsoring my pro team, yet no contacts are listed on the website, only a sales@logitech.com. I'm assuming that's what blah.com would, which you never get a response from.
Two things. One, it's one of those things is like how I do with my proposals for my videos. If you're going to be sending an email to one of those generic sales email addresses, essentially, you have to almost tailor your email to stand out a little bit in a professional manner. Like change the font size, nothing like crazy or all caps or purple or anything like that. And adding like a professional image or even having your tag on your email address, go out and spend $10 and get your own domain. So that way you can have a professional tag and it's not just at Gmail. It's not just at Yahoo. It's something that's a little more professional. Can you guys hear me still? I lost Brandon. I don't know if I... Okay. All right. So, all right. I lost Brandon on my screen, but basically it's one of those things where, as people are scrolling through those emails for the sales reps, they want to take they're going to be looking at them at a glance really quickly. And the ones that look more professional, the ones that look actually serious and well put together, they're going to give the time of day, in my opinion. So it's one of those things where, take, like the whole talk we've been talking about, take 5 minutes and think, does this look professional? Is this coming off professional? Is this coming off well put together? Or is it just a random person going, hey, I want to be sponsored by you. And they send off a message and that's all they see in the sales rep. And they're like, delete. So, take the time to put together, well put together email, and tailor it the best you can, is my opinion, because, when you do those things, the company you're emailing was going to take you just as seriously as how serious you take your communications. So communications is huge, in my opinion, as far as how you handle yourself, because I have employees that I work with on a daily basis that I can promise you on a daily basis, they're going to make at least 5 to 10 mistakes a day. I still have to work with them on a daily basis. And so I adjust how I communicate with them so that way I'm not condescending, I don't talk down to them, but I facilitate their strengths and try to compensate for their weaknesses and how I manage them on a daily basis. And it's one of those things where you just have to, how you tailor yourself, how you carry yourself in a professional manner matters in the long run, and matters in how people are going to respond to you as well.
I think you're exactly right with that. But yeah, no, and kind of another thing to add to that is, go to LinkedIn. It's if you're not familiar with LinkedIn, you can also search for companies. If you're looking for an esports company directly, it's a little bit harder to find because not all of them are kind of listed on there. Or, some of them are listed on LinkedIn, but if you're looking for a company directly, it's a little bit easier to find. Some profiles aren't used. I've even seen that with EPN members. I'd say probably only about 50 or 60% of them actually use LinkedIn on maybe like a weekly or monthly basis. But I would say probably 90% of them have LinkedIn profiles of some sort, just from the data that I've gathered. So with that, it's relevant to search for specific kind of companies, and then also people inside that company. So if you're looking for Logitech, you're going to be looking for the marketing department. So you're looking, someone on the ground level, or someone that you feel like you could actually connect with on that level. And I've said this from an early age on. If you're looking to network with people at a specific company, look at how you can kind of be unique. Because obviously marketing departments have their connections, and they're going to do things ABC type ways. So if you can kind of stand out from the crowd and be offered them something different, there's the opportunities out there. And Logitech, they're always looking for things like this. So your value can kind of offer them something above and beyond what they're getting somewhere else. Get out there and reach out to them. So I don't know if David answered the second question or not, as I kind of jumped out there for a sec. But how do I know if my outbound emails even get to inboxes? First, I get an email 30 days later saying, "Oh, sorry, I found this in my junk mailbox." I would probably say on this one, you can always do kind of look for an ask, an easy ask, just to get the reply. I've used that tactic in a few emails, just looking for an easy ask, then kind of the later on mumbo jumbo. And that can be something very, very simple, but and it always could be like, "Hey, I was looking to get some more information about your company, but I'm also looking for blah, 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 this." So something that maybe they have a generic reply for that you can kind of get an easy reply. I haven't experimented much with, I guess, the email confirmation. I think Google has email confirmations, but I don't know. I don't know if David's played with it.
I've not played with that too much, but also, I mean, it's one of those things where I don't like reply to all or forward to all those like emails your grandma sends you. So it's never something that I've never had one of my emails go to someone's spam box. So I guess I don't really know how to handle that, other than watch how many emails you send out so someone doesn't think you're spam and accidentally block you, that blocks all future emails. Or if you need to, again, set up a new email that's just for your esports related content, so that way that specific email is not going to have spam, not going to have a bunch of random stuff going to it. It's just going to be business.
No, I think you're right with that. There's definitely things that email things look for, and obviously each company has a different settings for their inboxes. So I think it is. It's a tough game to play the spam game, but if you get lucky, you're going to be hitting the right people, especially if you go the LinkedIn route of trying to find their contact information from there. Typically, you're going to get a good response if you go that route. Either sending them a message on LinkedIn, but then you also have to make sure that person is actually active on LinkedIn, because I have run into that case before where I sent messages and that person has not, like, you go to the recent activity, they have like nothing at all. So, also be careful of that. So, last call for questions.
I mean, I was just thinking of just another point as far as professionalism. Professionalism, being professional. Like a recent experience I had with, we were house shopping recently, and we set up an appointment with the realtor to, go see a house and everything like that. And I'm old because I still have a house phone, but we called them from the house phone. And we show up at the house the next day and they're not there. And we call their phone, and they're no answer. And apparently they wanted to reschedule, and they texted my house phone, which a house phone doesn't get texts, but they just assumed that texting would be okay and be a professional tactic. And they're excused me of, why would you text? Like, when I asked them, like, why would you text in the first place? Like, if I said, okay, yeah, go ahead and text me, that's a different case. But like, I'm about to spend tens of thousands of dollars with you. I don't want you to text me. I want you to call me. Be a professional. And, her excuse of, well, I text everyone and it's never been a problem. It's like, well, it was a problem today when you dealt with someone with a house phone and you were not dealing with that realtor anymore because to me, that was unprofessional to just assume they can text me like that. I don't know. It's little interactions like that we find in esports a lot where people they make the assumption that, sending a simple message or, sending something simple and that's not well put together is going to be okay, is going to be professional and going to be going to get a good response back. I mean, you're going to get back what you put into it. So take a little effort, take a little time and, put good work out there.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think we're going to wrap up the show here. And so David, if you have any final thoughts, if that was your final thoughts, that's awesome. But do you have any other thoughts on professionalism? What's kind of your last
foot and mouth syndrome is basically my last word of thought, because when you're having a long week and you're trying to send out a message saying that this week really kicked my ass, but you actually type an L instead of a K and it's this week licked my ass. Taking the 5 minutes to proofread what you are writing will go a long way. So they can follow me at Bowman Shota.
And
my weekly show, Coffee and Scott's Esports Show, can be found at esports.online. And also at you can go to Bowman Shota on YouTube for all the rest of my content.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David. My final piece of advice to people: if you do send DMs on Twitter, end it with a cheers, your name. I hate when people send me DMs and I have no idea who I'm talking to. So if you're doing the whole direct message game, make sure you're including your name at the end of the conversation, even if it's coming from your personal Twitter account. I still want to.
You're breaking up a lot, Brandon, on my end at least. I don't know how it is for everyone else.
So be sure to check that out and be sure you start kind of going that direction.
Well, we lost Brandon, but I agree with Jeremy. Don't end your direct messages with Crowdfire. If you can't pony up the money to pay for the Crowdfire app, just do it manually. Send a manual direct message instead of using the @Crowdfire. So Jeremy made a good point, but yeah, what were you saying, Brandon? Because you were the Terminator again.
Yeah, I was pretty much saying the don't or if you're gonna do the direct message game, are we good now? Okay, if you do the direct message game, just make sure you have your name on the end of the direct message. I want to know who I'm talking to. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who tuned into this panel. And hopefully I'm not sounding like a Terminator at the end of this, but I would just like to say thank you to our panelist, David, and guys give him a follow, and we'll be back next week here at the same time. So cheers, guys.